ProxMox is a virtualization platform that runs on Linux and uses KVM as the virtualization engine in the back end. Now, in contrast to VMware Workstation, VirtualBox, and VirtManager, it is a custom-built server based on Debian that offers a web console for management instead of running on top of a Linux desktop. Frankly, it's awesome. The screencast is going to provide a very basic overview of some common virtualization features used in ProxMox, but it really won't even scratch the surface on everything that it's capable of. We're going to take a look at the ProxMox cluster services, how to access ProxMox, a little bit about physical host management, some cluster management, and a little bit about the VM management as well. So first thing you need to know is, of course, how to get into it. And the only interesting thing there is it's going to be https://, then the IP address of any one of the virtual host servers that are in the cluster, then a colon, and 8006. So this service runs on port 8006 by default. You could change that if you wanted to, but that's outside the scope of this screencast for sure. So we log in using root and the password that we set up during installation. And if we have the free version, the community version of this software, when you log in, you'll notice that you'll get this note about no valid subscription. Just click OK. That's not a problem. So the first thing you'll notice is that in this default server view of the data center, we have two virtual servers, virtual host servers in place, MTVS1 and MTVS2. You'll notice the red icon on MTVS1. That's because that server is down, so we can see that that node is down or having a problem. All of the nodes, if we had more nodes in here that were up and running properly, they would all show up as green. So definitely a good indicator that you want to take a look at when you log in. Now, ProxMox uses something called CoroSync for the cluster management file system, and that allows you to add up to 16 physical servers into one console. We only have 2 here, but you could have up to 16, again, managed from one console. That's what's supported. Technically, you could have, I want to say, upwards of 64, but that is definitely the absolute maximum, and you may run into some serious issues if you're trying to do that in production. So everything inside one cluster, what's great is you can manage the virtual machines, backups, the storage pools, and even migrating the VMs between these servers, all from one console. Let's look at the physical host management or the physical nodes. If we click on a specific node here in the left-hand menu, here in the data center pane, you can, on the summary tab, well, you can take a look at the basic stats of the server, the hardware, and then the performance statistics. Kind of nice, you've got the syslog tab, so any errors that have happened in the server, you can see those there. You've got other tabs you can go through here to configure and look at. And on the search tab, if you want to find a specific virtual machine, you could type that in here. Say, for example, if we wanted to find an OVAS, an OpenVAS server, these things, you don't have to hit enter, but it'll just find anything that we're looking for as soon as we have 2 characters in there, in that search field. So also within this node that we're working with, you'll notice that we have these options up here in the upper right-hand corner of the menu to restart the server, to shut down the server, or to access the shell. And this is really slick. If we just click on that shell button right there, this will take us to the actual console of the server. So from here you can do things like run apt-get update. You can use scripts to manage the VMs. You can basically do anything that you want if you were right there from the server console. The other button that's up here that's really handy is this More menu. From here, it lets you start or stop all virtual machines that are on a single node, or migrate all virtual machines to a different node. And this is very slick if we're going to be dealing with maintenance for an extended period of time on a server. So let's look at a couple of other things here. Within the cluster management, if we click on the data center portion here up in the upper left-hand corner, We get a few extra tabs that are useful. For example, there is the storage tab. We can add or remove different storage backends. We can manage backups for all of the virtual machines from here. And we can also look at authentication. We can add something, for example, like if we wanted to add an Active Directory or an LDAP server for authentication, we can do that there. So some pretty cool things we can manage all from within this one web console. Some of the things I want to look at that's kind of unique to ProxMox from what I've seen is every time you create a virtual machine, you create it and you give it a virtual machine ID. Now that ID is permanent, it sticks with that VM, and of course it has to be unique within the cluster. But then after you have that set up, you can rename it anytime you want just by going to the options menu, and you could change the name of that machine here, but that virtual machine ID is always going to remain the same. That virtual machine ID is going to correspond then to the actually to the names of the virtual machine disks and folders on the file system where you find those servers. Let's look at some of the individual functions here that you can manage of the VMs themselves. Standard things you would expect, of course, on the hardware tab, you can add or remove different types of hardware, disks, network cards, increase the amount of memory, processors, things like that. You can also come in here and change the ISO images to of a different from one to another, and you can change the boot options to change how you're going to start it up. Do you want it to boot off of CD first, network, or whatever it might be. Now each VM itself, if you just right-click the VM, you can start them, you can migrate it to a different virtual host server, to a different node, you can pause it, suspend it basically, resume of course if it's been suspended, shut it down, stop it, clone it. This will actually let you create a whole new clone of that VM, which is a very handy feature, or convert to template. That convert to template is really handy because if you know you're going to be deploying multiple machines of a certain type, you can get it all customized and then you can convert it to a template. And then once you have that template, you can just take it and you can clone it. That template will then clone to a new virtual machine, or you can migrate it to a different node if you want to. And of course, last but not least is the ability to run the console on these VMs. When we open up the console, we can get straight to the console. I mean, I don't know what else to say there. A couple of things to keep in mind. Start is friendly. Shutdown is friendly. Again, it's the ACPI type friendly stuff. Stop and reset, those are both kind of hard options. A hard stop or a hard reset, you don't want to do that unless you absolutely have to. You want to, if nothing else, you want to at least log into the virtual machine and shut it down gracefully if you can't do it from the shutdown option here. So do keep that in mind. You want to shut down machines. You don't want to stop them unless you absolutely have to, because that can definitely give you some problems. The last couple of things we want to look at within these virtual machines and the management of those is that on the summary tab, much like on the node summary, you can see the general performance statistics, CPU, memory, network traffic, and even disk I/O. So you can see, track down problem machines by looking at these performance statistics. And also kind of a nice feature is the snapshotting feature. This is available only if you're using the QCOW2 file system, which is the default, but do keep that in mind if you're using the raw file system or something else. Snapshots are not available within ProxMox. You must have QCOW2 disks to make that happen. So that's pretty much the summary of all of the basics within ProxMox. We'll create some screencasts about more detailed management functions, say, for example, with snapshots and creating VMs and managing storage and things like that.